Welcome back, everyone, for our third retrospective, our second design retrospective. This is the first time was a lot of fun. So Harshit and Farjar came up with the idea, and Harshit's making sure that I'm staying on track to make sure we have more of these. So this is great. Again, a lot of fun looking back at the history of Topcoder design and the challenges we have run. Very excited to have our panelists with us today. I am Tong, Iriantu, and Dara K, helping to discuss some of the projects and design outcomes that we are going to present to you today. As always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. This presentation is about the designs, it's about the designers, and if there's anything that you want us to dive a little deeper into, please do ask. And of course, everyone here on the panelists board, if you have things that you want to point out or things that you remember, please do speak up. Reminder to everyone why we're all here. So Topcoder Design, we are a global community focused on solving real world UI UX problems through this crazy thing that we do, crowdsourcing. And our whole mentality around this is being a challenge-based process where you as designers submit your design for critique and feedback by Topcoder customers, and now in the current and present time from the Design Review Board. In this design process, we promote design education, this concept of open design thinking and innovation through rapid design. It is all about challenging ourselves, what we consider the design process and the way we work together and communicate as a design community. So welcome back for our second design retrospective. So the first project I wanted to talk about today was a GE project that we had a few years ago. This one stood out to me based on the concept that I Am Tong came up with. This was the GE One HR employee portal. And so this whole idea of getting into portal design and what is a portal, how do portals work, and really how do employees interact with their company, with their brand, and how do they get the details and data that they need to work at a very large company like GE. If you're not familiar, GE is General Electric, and they have been historically a long time Topcoder customer. So what I liked about this one was that the customer came to us, which was the HR business owner, came to us with a lot of detail. Like they did their homework. They came to us with personas. They came to us with a lot of information architecture. They came to us with a lot of details around the employee experience. And their whole thing was really focusing in on what is the future of the employee experience and how can they be progressive and forward thinking in what this is going to be. At the same time that we ran this, we actually ran information architecture challenge. So they actually were looking for a variety of viewpoints, not only from the design community, but also from the information architects to see how they might be able to rethink, redesign, and reimagine the GE employee experience. So all of this material wasn't necessarily me writing it. They came to us with this content, and it was great for us to craft the challenge because they had a very clear vision of what they were looking for. And also they had a clear vision and feedback from their employees that we could provide to all of you designers, which I think whenever we have that kind of data and information, it obviously makes, I like to think it makes the design process more meaningful and ideally a little more easier in that you have a much more clear vision of who the user is. So the challenge was focused on design concepts for the One HR portal, and they were looking to make sure that employees are able to quickly find the right level of information in the right context. And of course, at the right time. So this is the idea of going in and seeing the data based on like what's happening to you at this moment. Are you able to get the right context and right time when you log in and find that information quickly? And then of course, across devices. So making sure that it works on mobile and also works on desktop and tablet. So what is OneHR? This was a portal. It had 3 views: the employee view, the manager view, and then the HR supporting view. And the idea is like this is supporting 300,000 employees over in 200 countries. So, and they currently have and support this many employees. So how can we look at this experience and of course, bring some new ideas to it? They came to us with a couple personas. In this case, I listed here Sally. And so this idea that as an employee, she's salaried, has a couple children, and is has medical coverage. So all the essential persona details for us to understand why Sally may be logging in and things that matter to her. On the platform, we ran this with 3 prizes. This would have been our large challenge. And then the designers who won were I Am Tong, I Am Infinite. The I Ams took 1st and 2nd. And then we had Black, who took 3rd. So I Am Tong's design stood out amongst the designs for the grid that Tong used and the approach to the overall experience. So what the customer liked at the time was that as you logged in and saw this, you had this ability to quickly search for things, but also the information was going to be populated and shown to the user quickly. I'm going to click into the prototype here. And so this would be the prototype. And this would have been like the final result. So the idea that as an employee, I can come in here, I can quickly search for things that matter to me. I can also hide information if I'm in a cubicle. I have other employees around me. If I don't want them to see things like my salary or numbers, the idea that this could be hidden. Okay, so these things could be X'd out. This idea that whenever I log in, I can understand how much time off I have or available days. How is my retirement fund, my career, the ability to allow someone to register for, even right now this would be very critical. I know a lot of employees are doing this because of COVID, but the ability to take online courses to improve your career and do things like that. So showing recommended courses, career opportunities. So overall, the customer was impressed, Tong, with your approach to this and the grid. It was different than some of the other grids and designs that we saw. We had these, I think originally you might have had a thinner column on the right side. In the final fixes widened it a little bit, but this idea that as we go through, we can get in and manage our settings. We have a smart search. They were exploring this functionality around the ability to just have the AI show the user the types of search results. And then of course, and when you get into your dashboard, can you manage it and can you rearrange things the way that you would like to rearrange them? And so Tong, to you, this is a few years ago. Do you remember this challenge and this project and kind of like the journey you went on to come up with this solution? Was there any research that you did, or what was kind of your thinking around your approach to this problem?
Yeah, it's been like quite long, but I think it's all I focus at the user. So what is important to them? What should be useful for them? So I put it all together and made the page structure and like organize things in like part like my pay, my careers, and on dashboard they can access to like other sections that I think at that time is important to them.
Okay. And I think the key thing here was that the grid broke down really well, responsive. So it had great break points and clear areas where things could fall off and show the user the materials that they would need in smaller screen sizes. And then the customer wanted to expand into, again, how is this portal useful? So can it also help you understand how to plan your vacation and do things like that? And then, of course, giving this idea of your profile and your career development and where could they help you continue in your career. So overall, a solid approach. And I know that obviously you took first place, so the customer is very happy about that, happy with your design. Let me go back to presentation. And then in second, we had I Am Infinite, who also had a very solid approach with more of the left column. I think what stood out, Tong, with yours, that you did the 2-column or the 3-column, the left bar and the right bar. And that right bar was something that could fall away easily. And the material contained in that right bar, the customer was found meaningful. But on I Am Infinites, solid approach to the dashboard, the ability for the user to customize it, and of course, overall clean design solid clean design and on brand with what GE was expecting. And as always, right now, I'm only sharing a couple screens, but obviously there was a lot of effort and a lot of screens behind this to showcase the overall user experience. And then in third, we had Vlak. And then he took more of, at the time, the feeling was this felt kind of like the column approach that you would have on, say, Facebook, where the centerpiece is a feed. And that feed is pulling in all this information that's constantly being updated for the user. So the customer thought this was intriguing, that the ability to be able to pull this data in and be able to just tab along and see all payments, announcements, and others, and have this be a little more of that social experience. So that's why they enjoyed this design and chose this as the third place, because that concept was something that they wanted to explore more. So before I continue on to the next, were there any questions with this specific project? And Tong, Irantu, Dara, any questions about this?
Adam, we have a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
And it's, did we have a mobile version of this?
Did we have a what version?
Did we build, or did we have a mobile version of this for these screens?
That's a great question. I don't think so. I think they really just wanted to see desktop, but it had to be planned for mobile. So in the challenge, I think we just had desktop.
Okay.
For some reason, I'm not able to see the Q&A right this second. Why is that?
We have another question in the chat.
Yeah.
That's a trivial. Like, how is the winner decided? How did you decide the winner?
The winner's decided by the customer. So the winner selected, the customer selected the winner based on the design, layout, their interest in moving the design forward, and of course doing some user testing with their employees. They were very excited about the outcomes, not only of this, but also the information architecture challenge, to have a variety of approaches to go and test. So that's how the winner was decided.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Going into another GE challenge. So this was for GE Transportation. And we called these, at the time, we called these the GET design challenges. So these were the GE Transportation design challenges. Transportation, who is now, they've been sold, they're now owned by a company called WebTech. Their design team loved working with us and you as the design community. And we had a series of challenges where we also had a leaderboard to kind of keep track of who was doing well on these challenges. GE Transportation had their design team had a great process where they would do a design thinking workshop, say a Monday and Tuesday. They would provide the inputs into the challenge. By Thursday, we'd launch the challenge. They would expect the checkpoint designs by Monday. They'd provide feedback by end of day Monday and have the final results due by Thursday morning. So they had a very planned out process to be part of their design model. And it was great working with that team. And of course, working within that model. And I think the structure that we created for that was also very beneficial for some of you as designers, because you were able to work within those timelines. So the very first one here was what they called positive train control. So, one of the things that customers sometimes ask us is how, GE transportation, positive train control, like, what does that mean? So ROS, TMS, PTC, SIMS, these are all acronyms that most people would not know. I don't know. I'm sure most of you don't know. But at this point, I'm sure some of you do know. So because you've gone and done the research. And I think that's part of the positive creative outcome of the model we have, is because you have an opportunity to go do the research, ask the customer some questions, learn more about the domain, and maybe the first challenge that domain knowledge may come through, it may not come through, but through a series of challenges, it does start to flourish. And of course, all of you as great Topcoder designers then can learn and understand the domain. So this was very interesting because, again, this whole other industry of how do you manage trains and what's the software that's created for that, and how do you create the UI for that, for this software. And the GE Transportation team came to us just to explore a variety of concepts in this. The process that they have, the experience that they have, is like a 50-year-old experience of managing trains. And it's like with some software that's been built over those 50 years, some of it's just technology that's aging. And so the ability to modernize those experiences and modernize the software, and of course, design that for future consumption and usage for different train companies. So this was the positive train control challenge. It was a 7-day challenge process, as I mentioned. The idea that they did a design thinking workshop with their customer and then handed it over to the Topcoder team and the Topcoder community to generate designs. So in this case, we structured all of the GET challenges similar to our RUX challenges, a little bit of a different structure, but we did have 5 prizes on the challenges that we ran, because we were looking for a little bit more and variety, and of course, engagement through a series of challenges. And our winner was Iriantu. Ravijun was 2nd, Andrino was 3rd, Chexper was 4th, and Tong was 5th in this specific challenge. And first place was Iriantu. Yeah. And this was his approach to the positive train control. So the problem here is understanding, where are the trains? What's the status of the train? So imagine a train has a lot of essentially IoT devices and data. And where does all that data go? And will this software consume that data, and the ability to track trains, but also the ability to track what the multiple trains on tracks, and of course avoid accidents, but also understand, is there machine failure coming up? Does a train need to have maintenance done? All of those kinds of things. And so Iriantu, if you recall this challenge, I think you did pretty well on some of the GET challenges, but do you remember kind of your process, or your kind of like how you approach this problem? Did you do some research? What was kind of your thinking when you went into this?
Well, actually, this challenge is a little bit challenging, because many terms that is unknown for me. So I do lots of research before jump into the challenge. Well, as you can see from previous slide, you mentioned about LOS, TMS, and then I did some research before I jumped into the challenge. And also one thing that important is in this challenge or next challenge, GE is require us to use Sketch. So it's first time for me to use Sketch also.
Yes, because that's a great note there, because as GE started working with us, they were asking in all of their challenges for us to use Sketch. It was like one of the first customers that was definitely saying, please use Sketch. I even think we actually had a couple challenges where we had a bonus we paid if you use Sketch. So
yeah,
that's a great memory on that one, because I forgot that. But I recall on your design, it definitely stood out as being super organized, you understanding the problem. The customer said, you know, it stood out that it was obvious that you had done your research. So thank you for that. And that the overall approach to it seemed very well thought out. They were also, you know, debating this, you know, when you use software like this, it's going to be possibly used in a tower or a dark office. So is it, you know, is the dark theme or a light theme, or the ability for the software to switch depending on where it's being used? Again, the customer is creating the software to sell the software to other train companies. So the exploration around that was also critical in this design challenge. So from what I recall, you know, I think, you know, you did a great job on your design. And as I said, it was well thought out. Second place, we had Ravi Jun, and he did a great job of, again, tracking the information, and it was a different approach to your approach, which they liked, that it created a variety of outcomes, but also getting into this whole idea of icons, color usage, because there's so much information that needs to be displayed on the screen. How do you display this information, and how do you allow icons and, say, radiance and circles and arrows to quickly tell the user what's going on? So there was a lot of refinement and thought going into a lot of the GET challenges, and then of course coming up with kind of what could be the possible new standard for them in some of the UI treatments that you guys were coming up with. So Ravi Jun, this was his approach in exploring the icons and color, and of course being able to understand track, station, and then of course any issues that are going on with the trains, and then if there's any failures. Third was Andrino. So as you can see across the three of these, so far, you know, each of you have tried different things, different icons, different approaches, and that was the goal, the design concepts. And so Andrino here had more of a train shape with an arrow of the shape to show direction, while Ravi had just more of this type of icon, and you had more of, you know, an icon that I believe you had it would either fill, the circle would fill depending on status. Yep. So a couple of different approaches here to representing that information, and then being able to zoom in on that content. And then Andrino here also had a great train detail, things like that. Fourth was Checkspur. Again, super clean approach, and I remember we really liked how the data on the left and right came across. Overall, felt super dark compared to some of the other designs because, you know, the grays here get lost, but the overall infographics stood out and were meaningful, because so we have red over here, we have some green, so the idea that you can quickly understand what that means, and then this idea of what are the shapes and icons being used. If you notice that, you know, based on Iriantu being first, you know, it didn't necessarily have to be a train shape, right? It was just this idea of a train or educated understanding around a standard that they could come up with that could be used in the software to make sure it could represent all the different statuses. Shakespeare, great job on showing the train detail. And then Tong, you had more of the switch it up and use more of a the lighter screen approach. Again, keeping the icons simple in here. Do you recall any of your thought process on this one, Tong, this project?
Not really. I actually forgot about it. Sorry.
No problem. Well, I wanted to call this one out because I thought the experience we had with that team was a great experience, and the problems and projects that we had were pretty intense and required a lot of research.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
as you can tell across the 5 designers on this, multiple approaches, and of course, I think the team was able to get out of this the exploration they were looking for on the icons, treatment of status, and understanding what's going on with the trains as they are proceeding across the tracks. Before I move on, any questions about this design retrospective?
Adam, there's a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
You probably were required to develop the admin panel or also the normal user screens.
This was the normal user screens. I don't believe we had the admin panel in here. This was more, well, I mean, I think this whole, now that I say that, I think this whole software was an admin panel, right? The idea was that this is someone in a command center tracking and understanding what's going on. So they are essentially an admin. This isn't used in the train. This is used in the command center to track the trains on the network. So think of it more of like a air traffic control, but for trains.
Got it.
But yeah, I think the thing, yeah, go ahead, Daniela.
Yeah, so I want to say like what I like the most about this challenge is like first is the problem, but then if you look at Arianto's design and then going back, the designers had to show like a lot of information that should be easy to scan at one view. When the person is looking, he should be getting a clear idea of what's happening on the dashboard. He should know what train is in which position, what status, and the data should be so well organized. I mean, the information hierarchy, the typography, they all should be super, super good done and executed so that this becomes very handy, especially when there are more trains and there are more conflicts or issues appear. And this is something that just like the top designers are getting to do, because you get into potential issues when you add more colors and more information and all those small data that adds up, then can become an issue. So I think Arianto did a really great job with his interface here. Like yeah, as we saw, like for Shakespeare, some of the text could not be read, but for Arianto, it's like the perfect balance. And even Ravi has a bit too much color variations and depths for the grays, for the whites.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. So, you know, the contrast and the use of color, and that's what they were going for, was this idea of how can I quickly look at a screen and from an icon, from a status color, from something to understand, to quickly be able to read and understand the problem without needing to essentially always focus in on something. If could the use of color, icons, typography help understand a situation quickly? So great UX problem. And I think what I really liked about this specific problem was the variety of approaches, and that's what they were looking for.
Adam, there's one more question in the Q&A. Did you follow some design pattern? And then there's an appreciation for the members that very good work. Yeah.
No. So this is where the team presented to us. I think they presented some wireframes around kind of what their current software was doing, but I think we left it. We didn't want to sway everyone because part of the exploration here was, do you just use a rectangle to represent the train? Do you use a circle? Do you use an arrow? How simple can you make the indicator and yet still show direction, maybe show velocity, show status? And so if we had presented an existing design pattern or existing solves, the thought was that would sway everyone to just use that pattern or that shape. And as you can tell from this, everyone used a different type of arrow or circle. So for example, Ariane 2, you used a circle that had a status on that. So essentially the circle is filling up. And then it also had an icon, right? And those things could change. Ravi June had essentially a circle with an arrow on it, but then it also had this idea of the pulse rings, okay? Andrino had like a rectangle, but had an arrow with tails. So this idea of showing direction and then also showing the gradient to show velocity. Okay, so how fast is the train moving? Faster than other trains? Is it, you know, is there an issue with that? So essentially the tail could change color to understand velocity on that. And of course the pulse for this, for his solution too. And then Shakespeare had an icon and a shape. And then again, you can kind of see some of the velocity being indicated by the color again around it. And then Tong, I think you ended up having, shape and an arrow, real simple circle with an arrow, and then of course the pulse. So, and multiple colors for those. So again, exploring the possibilities, not necessarily any one of them being the right answer, but the potential for any of them to be the answer after some user testing and of course more continued exploration. And Ariane too, after I mentioned that, any other thoughts around the icons or anything do you recall from that strategy?
Well, actually, GE provided us a branding system, but they didn't say we must use this icon, we can explore anything. So I thought that it will be good if we can see what status on the train at the first glance. So I make the icon on the circle, put the train icon, and then if the train is failed, I suppose I want to do the train with the red circle, say the status is maybe doing a fail on the train. So that's how I go with that idea. Okay. And you can see the impact monitor, some fail, so we can deep dive to the specific information about the train, which part is failing, maybe some train failure or some delay happening on the train. That's my thought when I design this screen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of if you had a similar challenge or something provided, I was wondering if this challenge wasn't coming after the TCO 16 event where you had the problem given by G somehow similar. Some of the members were competitors there. I don't know if it was a follow-up or it was before.
I think
I want to say this was.
This is before, and TCO is follow-up.
Yeah. So these were before the TCO, and then that was where the idea was that some of the knowledge that had already been learned by the competitors could be leveraged. So the research had been done in the previous challenges, or the understanding of the of the business and the domain.
Oh, that's good.
We have a follow-up question from Vicky. She was thinking about the same question as GE has predicts. I mean their UI design system. So if they were to apply these designs, would they solve it by actually applying predicts onto the winner design?
So at the time, predicts, the UI for predicts hadn't been finalized. So this goes back a few years. And I believe the transportation team would still be, like, they may leverage some of those patterns, but I still believe that they would have been creating this, you know, for their specific customer, right? So while the predicts patterns and system may have been referenced or leveraged, I think they would still have focused on, you know, the user testing, obviously, with their customer, because it was software that they were creating to sell. So it predicts, it wasn't mandatory, let's put it that way. And that's my opinion, just to qualify that.
But I believe that at the moment, GE provided us like a color guideline, font, and then like some guideline. Well, you can use this theme if you want to. And then that's why you can see almost all the design looks familiar and use the same font, the same color they provided for us. That's all.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the next case study we have, unless there's more questions. Harshit?
We don't have any questions for this one, yeah.
Okay, so moving, the next one that I selected here was our live user experience number 20. So this goes back a little ways. This was our mobile research reports library design concepts challenge. So this was focused on creating and exploring UI, a mobile UI based on data visualization techniques. So the goal of the challenge was to design visual concepts for a new mobile tool that will allow clients and employees the ability to access and display and filter a library of research reports. So imagine you have 100,000 research reports, PDFs, and you want to be able to create a way to find these reports and to be able to read these reports and also understand the relationship of a report, one report to the next report. And so they really wanted to use visualization techniques to understand those relationships. So a user will go into the tool, search for a specific keyword, and see results of their search through a highly graphical user interface that not only shows them the report, but how the report visually connects to other keywords, categories, and reports. So they provided us this guidance of like, we want to explore data visualization techniques, and I'm showing a few here, you know, word bubbles, association, things like that. And the ask of the designers was that we're looking for a new graphical user interface using modern data visualization techniques. And so that was the approach. And all of this data would be essentially coming from a data lake of PDF files. And so how can we create something or come up with something new? Visually approach this. And the thing that stood out to me, and the reason I like this one, is because it was this idea of a 3D experience in a 2D space. So you have your phone and the ability to see a PDF, but maybe click beyond the PDF, zoom in, zoom out, almost see the structure of the relationship of other PDFs to that information. So this specific UX problem, I remember this one, it stood out. I thought it was really cool, the outcomes that we received, and that's why I wanted to show it today in our retrospective. So this was a Lux challenge, and so we had 8 prizes, starting at 1,500, 1,000, 500, 250, 250, 100, 150. So 8 prizes for this, and this was back in 2016, and this was Lux number 20. We had, of course, so we had 8 winners. We had Twibo took first place. We had Daniela Darake took second. Rio took third. M. Zakowski took fourth. And Kelvin Webb Design 5th, Think Creeper 6th, No Fear 7th, and the legendary Diablo took 8th. And so first place, Twibo. So here are his presentation screens from the Lux. If you are not familiar, when we run Lux, Live User Experience Challenges, or RUX, Rapid User Experience Challenges, we typically ask for a presentation screen. So the idea of showcasing your design. This challenge did focus on 8 mobile screens. And I'll showcase a few of them here, but I thought Twibo did a solid job of exploring this UI, but also exploring the interactions of the UI. And so while we left the brand open, the key thing here was how do you see these PDFs and how do you see those relationships and how do you zoom in and zoom out? So Twibo also gave a great description around what's going on in the UI. And so let me share. One second. Close my mail. Okay. So are you able to see the screen? Okay. So here are some of the mobile screens. So going through the experience, you essentially have your initial reports that would show up, and then be able to see this exploded, and then be able to interact and essentially pinch and zoom in the UI. Breadcrumbs to be able to show you where you're at when you click on something, and then the ability to click on it and actually read the PDF and have it go full screen. Be able to show relationships and click into those different areas and drill in, and then this ability to see almost again 3D in a 2D space, this background. So the idea that you're drilling down into additional information, additional areas. So was very excited about the outcomes of this specific approach. This hit pretty much exactly what the customer was looking for. The exploration around, how do you interact with all of this information? Now, it didn't need to be super visual as in photos, right? It just needed to be easy to understand of how you can pinch and zoom and drag and dive into, again, this idea of a 3D 3D space and a 2D UI. And in this specific challenge, I think we also did a couple tablet screens. So also how it might look on the iPad. So above and beyond, Twibo went above and beyond showing this UX. Obviously, we were focused on 8 screens, but he did definitely capture a lot of the different steps inside that. In second, we had Daniela Darake. So Daniela, here are your presentation screens, and jumping into the design. So jumping into login, register, going into the dashboard. You had showing immediately this idea of color coding, so that the user would have an understanding of their favorites, their top 25, being able to then click or tap into and dive into those areas. Yep. And then showing how if I click on economics, I now see my spokes. I now see PDFs at this level. If I want to click into tap into global real estate, I have 8 more PDFs, or country industries, I have 13 more PDFs at that level. So now I've clicked into country industry. So again, how do I drill into this information? Daniela, any thoughts on this one? Do you remember this one?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been designing for a long time now that I copilot most of the days, but I do remember it. And what I liked about this challenge was that, first of all, the problem itself, it was like so different and unique, and the challenge as in how do you manage so many files and categories with subcategories and importance, show it on a small device, on a mobile, not on desktop, and also allow the user to easily navigate through it, like through all these levels, and how can he find files based on keywords. So the entire experience was supposed to be seamless. And when I started thinking about the problem, and I started doing research on data visualizations, there were like so many options to explore. And I think for most of the data visualization, this can be a challenge itself, like which data visualization is the best for your problem. I mean, there are several that can fit, but which one represents the best, the problem that you can read the information the most easier. So in the end, I came like with these bubble charts, and I remember thinking that they could be like folders that we have on a computer, and then each category is like a folder, and as you go through a category, you can either see the files or other subcategories like other folders and structuring. And then came the idea of hierarchy, like the most important or those that have the most files would be larger and the other items smaller. And then additional functionality like share, email. And then one other stuff was how to still give up classic navigation to the user. I think I included the list view as well in the, so the user can switch from the 3D view, the 3D cloud rotating into a more list view approach, so he can quickly go back through the breadcrumb that we can still see on the tablet here. So yeah, that was my idea mainly in this challenge.
Yeah, because I remember this was when the customer asked us about this, I was very excited about the challenge, the opportunity, but it was also a hard thing to maybe mentally visualize, right? Planning, like,
Yeah.
how do you tap in and drill in and see things in almost a 3D space, but on your 2D screen. So
yeah, and also limited size, like the mobile is not a lot you don't have a lot of space to rotate things or to activate them. So like actions like pinch and zoom would help there.
Yep. And then it gets busy, right? So how do you,
yes.
You might be touching, yep. Okay. In third place, we had Rio. And so let me pull up his approach. So opening up with the dashboard, so things that maybe are bookmarked, recommended, or shared already, and then showing kind of a more of a traditional mobile footer with your dashboard history, filter, notifications, and settings, but showing essentially size and relationship to these different areas. And then he was showing how you may interact with this by pinching and zooming within the space. So essentially the form is there. Now, how do you essentially navigate that form? Zooming in and zooming out, and then swiping. And then when you tap on it, it changes the color. You're now zoomed in on that specific area. You click into the next one, and now again, you see those spokes, and you see, now you start to see the PDFs and you start to see the data. So a solid approach for third place. And again, a different construct by essentially the user being able to see the web, so to speak, and then being able to navigate that. Fourth place, we had M. Zakowski, okay? So, and his approach. There we go. Showing multiple groupings and then being able to essentially navigate those groupings. So a zoomed out view, and then the ability to zoom in and then tap into the different groupings for more detail and showing the relationships of the data. So I think the concept that came across here was this idea of seeing this zoomed out view and the ability to kind of navigate and move into those visually. Okay, and fifth place, we had Kelvin Web Design. I've not seen Kelvin around lately, but he also had a solid approach. So let's get into the individual screens. Yeah, so I remember, yeah, Kelvin had a great README where he went in and explained each of the screens. This was before I think we were using Marvel app as much as we are now. But this essentially was showing the different categories. You could move around in the space and then be able to tap into it and then see the different subcategories inside the main category. And then once you tap into it, it converts. And I thought this was a cool approach on once you actually tap into it, being able to see some of the information. Now it does get confusing because some of the words and things like that are upside down, but the ability to now navigate that and see kind of those relationships. So nice job. In 6th, we had Think Creeper. And this, again, ability to use color, to use those relationships to show, to understand possibly what those categories are, and then be able to tap into them. And now you're inside that category and seeing those relationships. Seventh, we have No Fear, who took a completely different approach and essentially showed, more of the, let's say, scatter dots, where essentially we have a type 1, type 2, type 3. Today's report, last month, keywords, and then overview around the information. So being able, again, using color, but being able to navigate within this space, which gets pretty busy. But I recall the reason we liked this was because it was a different approach, right? A different type of understanding of how to drill into the data and see those relationships.
Yeah, Vic is asking about something similar. If does anyone remember if the ones who didn't win in this one, what type of visualizations they tried with, which is not the bubble type?
Yeah, I think most gravitated towards the bubble type at the end, because that was the ability to solve the ask of the 2D, 3D space. Now, if we get to Diablo 8th, he had a completely different approach. And it's funny when you go back and look at these things in this retrospective. I'm trying to figure out why he ended up being 8th, because his solution was definitely unique. And so he did more of, I guess I would say, more realistic, more skeuomorphism around the interactions. I just wanted to show this was his presentation screen, and then he also showed all these different interactions in a very long version. So this is the vertical version of showing all of the interactions. But if we look at the design, went more of actually showing a visual representation of books and data and information, and being able to say, okay, I just want to see headlines, I want to see top 25, I want to see favorites, and then being able to essentially swipe through and see these the different PDF reports. I want to click into it. It now shows me it as more of a book. And then I can actually then go and see the relationships. So I see this specific PDF. I click on relationships. I can now see more of this 3D space and what is the relationships of other categories, subcategories to that specific PDF. So again, a completely different approach to solving this. And I think that's what, if I recall from the customer, that's what they definitely liked, that this was, completely different approach, highly visual, but the thinking was it may have been a bit too much to build because of the first place one wouldn't be as graphics heavy, right? But again, this is this feels very very Gerald design and his approach to trying something completely different. But being able to see the pinch, drag, zoom in, and being able to see the different areas, and gives you more of that 3D VR experience. So any comments or questions or thoughts on this? Danielle, do you remember seeing any of the other designs?
No, not really. I think this is great and unique as approach. Like always, Jablo was having fun with the designs and doing it for his own happiness and being, you know, like being bold all the time. So definitely something to appreciate about him.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to stop on this one. Any questions around the retrospective projects that I brought today? Anything in the Q&A? Any of you on the panel, any other comments or thoughts that you have about anything that we covered today? Bring back some good memories? Okay. Well, I think maybe I think outside of this, I'll create a suggestion list for maybe the next retrospective. If anybody has projects that they would like us to, they would like me to cover, and dive in even more within the context of a, you know, a 1 hour webinar. Harshit, are there any more questions out there?
No, Adam, all good.
Okay.
Yeah, we covered everything.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. Thank you, Arian2, Dara, and Tong. This was great to see you today. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the 3 different design projects we brought to you today. And as always, feel free to reach out if you have questions, if you'd like to learn more. And then if there are projects that you have been on at Topcoder and have designed and you'd like to see me cover in a future session, please do let me know. Adam@topcoder.com.